Good morning, everybody. My name is Jake Rice, statewide salmon and steelhead manager, and welcome to the 2026 North of Falcon kickoff. Before we get started, welcome to everybody who traveled here in person and also those with us online. I'm going to go through a couple guidelines and etiquette rules before we start to dig in this presentation. Upon joining the virtual meeting or in person, your microphone will be muted automatically. In case of any technical issues during the meeting, notify us in the chat. We will help you. The chat will only be monitored for technical assistance. Public comments are welcome and will be rotated between in-person and virtual attendees. To ask a question or make a comment, please use your device's raise hand feature. If on the phone, dial *9 on Zoom. If using a computer, click the hand reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. And if in person, please raise your hand. During the comment period, the host will enable you to unmute yourself. You can then unmute yourself by pressing the mute button on your device or dialing *6 on your phone. Keep discussions focused on the agenda items and questions at hand. Offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity, personal attacks, threats, or insult towards individuals, governments, or organizations, is strictly prohibited. Assume positive intentions from those speaking and listen respectfully. To ensure a balanced discussion, limit your comments to 2 minutes with one clarifying follow-up question. Provide constructive feedback regarding the fisheries in which you participate. Remember that most compelling comments are those that pertain to the topics under discussion today. WDFW staff may close public comment to stay on schedule with the agenda or to provide others who still need to comment with an opportunity to speak. Hybrid meetings will be recorded and posted online. If you have further comments, questions, please submit them in the written format on our public comments page. Thank you, everybody. Again, welcome to our statewide salmon forecast meeting. Please let me know if I don't hold the mic correctly, you can't hear me. I think we're good so far. So to get us started off, I'm going to pass the mic over to our director, Kelly Suswin, for a couple remarks and opening statements.
Thanks, Jake. Welcome, everybody, to our kickoff meeting for 2026 North of Falcon. Good to see you all here and online. So those of you that have been here before, you know this is the start of a sprint. We've got a ton of work to do over the next 6 weeks as we set our salmon seasons. So it's time to get involved and kind of hang on. There's a ton of work between now and when we wrap up that first full week in April. Staff will be running hundreds or thousands of options for fisheries, engaged with the tribes, trying to engage with you, having multiple, probably dozens, I think it adds up to dozens of public meetings on individual fisheries. We really want to lean on you to help us put this all together. One of our focuses is just that, keeping you in touch and working with you so as we work through things. Today we start off with forecasts. So you can understand where we have highs and lows. We go to PFMC 1 next week. That's in Sacramento. That's where we set ocean options. And then the real meat of the matter is that first full week in April, when we'll be at PFMC 2, Pacific Fisheries Management Council for the acronym. Apologize for that. Be in Portland this year. As we've done in the past, we will have daily meetings down there, so you can either join online or, since it's in Portland, if you're there in person, every morning. I think it would still be at 7 a.m. as far as I know. Typically, it's been 7 a.m. So you know everything we've learned over the last 24 hours, what we're planning to do for the next 24 hours, then we'll check in again the next day. So I'll leave it to our expert staff to go over the forecast today. There's highs and lows, as always, and as always, we'll be constrained by particular stocks. Those of you that know how it rolls, those constraining stocks control fisheries even out beyond the constraining stocks, especially in those mixed fisheries areas. So we'll work through all that today, talking about which stocks we're really concerned about, which ones are doing better. I feel somewhat like I'm whining a little bit because I've been doing it for the last 2 weeks, but another layer that we're going to have to consider this year is our budget. We always have to consider budget, but we're in the budget setting process for the state right now. Both chambers of the legislature came out with their budgets this week on Wednesday, so it's out of the House Appropriations, Senate Ways and Means. And there's some tough news for us in both of those budgets. directed, overall, we're down at least about $10 million in cuts for the agency. That's distributed amongst a fairly large budget we can manage, but there's some very directed cuts towards fish program, and also a failure to fund our maintenance requests, our basic ongoing cost requests for enforcement. So some of those direct cuts were focused at what's called monitoring. We have a little flexibility in there, and the failure to support the maintenance level for our officers, depending on which house you're in, will be anywhere from 9 to 13 positions that we'll have to eliminate. We've got some vacancies. We're not talking about losing any particular officers right now, but our ability to maintain that pipeline and keep officers coming, we'll have to, if the budget goes through as it is, remove 9 to 13 officers. It's not final yet. We're fighting like hell. That's why I say I feel like I'm whining here, because I've been doing it for the last week and a half trying to avoid some of this. But right now we're in the conference budget where they take those two budgets, go away and come up with a final state budget. It's really tough time to get in the door at that point. And it's even tougher to get something that's not in either budget, which is exactly what we're asking for, both in our programmatic stuff and in our enforcement stuff. The reason I mention it here is this is one of the things for us to put on a fishery. We have to be able to monitor it, and we have to be able to enforce it. And so it's another layer as we go through. The budget will be finalized in a couple of weeks. We'll know where we're at by the end of session. But we'll have to be factoring that in as we consider fisheries too, that make sure that we have adequate monitoring and enforcement to put the fisheries on. So it's just another factor we're going to have to consider as we go through this, in addition to all the layers of the onion that some of you know very well on which constraining stocks we're hitting, the times of fisheries, our ability to enforce it, et cetera. So it's just an extra layer. I don't want to be too much of a downer. It's just, we'll work through it, and we'll work through it with you. That's the important part. But it's another factor that'll be a little more prominent than it has been in the past. So I'm going to quit taking up time because we got a ton of stuff to get through. Because we have a lot to get through, I'm also going to suggest that if we get too far down trail on a specific issue or too detailed on a specific issue, please don't be offended if we say, let's take that offline. We'll get you your answers. We'll engage with you. But for the respect of everybody's time today and to get through it all, we probably won't go in too much depth in any particular area. Or if we start feeling like we are, we'll ask you to work with us on the side. Again, we'll work with you, but let's reserve the time for the group. I think that's all I have to say. I'm looking forward to it. I think we'll come out with some good fishing as usual. Not as good as we want, as always, but I think we'll be doing okay. And I'll leave it to our folks that know the details now to get you through those. Thanks. I should say, Kyle. Kyle Addix will take it from here. So next step.
Thank you, Director, and good morning, everybody. You see the agenda for the day now. Just heard from Director Susuin. I'm going to speak quickly to just a high-level overview of what is north of Falcon and what the steps of the process are. From there, I'm going to turn it over to Tom McBride from the Fish Program. He's going to talk about our new electronic licensing and upcoming electronic harvest reporting options. And then we'll get into the meat of the meeting. We'll hear from a number of our scientists on the environmental outlook and the forecast for stocks around Washington. With that, I will jump into the north of Falcon overview. Most of you know, some people show up and they still don't know what north of Falcon is. The next slide starts to get into that. North of Falcon is the annual cooperative process that we use to plan salmon seasons for Washington waters. The name Falcon comes from the point in Oregon, Cape Falcon, and Washington stocks tend to complete their ocean migrations north of there, and it's kind of the southern border of where Washington's actively involved in management of Washington stocks. And it's one part, one more point on that slide. It's one part of a larger salmon season setting process that also involves the state, tribal governments, federal regulators, other U.S. states, and Canada. So salmon have a big ocean migration, and a lot of people have to be involved in season planning. So what guides the north of Falcon process? There are a whole list of things we have to consider as we set seasons. This is a short list. We have a number of ESA listed stocks in Washington. Those ESA constraints really affect how we manage our fisheries. We have policies from the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission that guide our decisions as we move through the process. We have a salmon treaty with Canada, so the Pacific Salmon Treaty obligations have to be carefully considered as we affect Canada's stocks and they affect ours. Tribal co-management is a huge one. Washington's treaty tribes manage their own fisheries. They share data and split harvest with the state, and we have to work cooperatively to make sure all of our fisheries, when combined, meet all of our conservation objectives and other obligations. And we have a huge monitoring and evaluation program for fisheries statewide. So as we implement these fisheries, we're out there monitoring, we're making in-season decisions on how to run the fisheries, and all of that data feeds back into our process for understanding our stocks and how to plan fisheries. As the director mentioned, this is just the start of a sprint. This is just kind of a generalized timeline for what happens in the next couple of months. The last couple of months, WDFW and tribal staff have been working on salmon forecast. Today on that left is the forecast release for a lot of our stocks. And as you heard, next week we go down to Sacramento and start on that Fishery Management Council meeting and developing options for ocean fisheries, not just off Washington, but off Oregon and California as well. And then we'll have a number of public meetings throughout March focused in different areas and looking at fishery options for the coast, for the Columbia River, for Puget Sound, for the ocean. We'll start developing draft seasons, and there'll be a lot of modeling that has to go on as we change season structures and the tribes change season structures as we get additional information from northern fisheries. Again, trying to find season packages that meet all of those obligations. And we have that legal framework, the US v. Washington, US v. Oregon, the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the Endangered Species Act, state law, and the Pacific Salmon Treaty that all have to be factored in. Next slide, we'll get to April, and we'll have to have all of those fisheries, including whatever the final ocean fisheries look like, combined into packages that meet all our conservation objectives. For Puget Sound fisheries in particular, NOAA will have to go through a process to analyze those, make sure that they meet ESA requirements and give us authorization for Puget Sound fisheries. And then we have a number of administrative rulemaking things that have to happen in May and June as we take those fishery packages, translate them into WAC language, and take comment on pieces of those. The next couple of slides are just the detailed meeting schedule for this year. We're here at February 27th on the top. You've heard already that we'll be in Sacramento for the Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting. We come back from that and quickly start having regional meetings. There'll be a coastal Willapa Bay Grace Harbor meeting on the 12th. There'll be a Columbia River Fisheries meeting on the 17th, and that's focused on the Upper Columbia. On March 18th, we'll have our first North of Falcon public meeting, which will be back here in this room on the 18th. On the 23rd, there'll be a public hearing for the Pacific Fishery Management Council on ocean fisheries in Westport. On the 24th, in the evening, we'll have a Puget Sound Freshwater and Marine Recreational Fisheries meeting. On the 26th, another one focused on Hood Canal and the Strait of Juan de Fuca Recreational Fisheries. And then on March 31st, we'll be up in Linwood at the Embassy Suites for the North of Falcon #2 meeting. April 2nd, there'll be a Columbia River Fisheries meeting for the Lower Columbia. And then, as you heard from the director, that first full week in April will be down in Portland for that second Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting. There is a ton of information on our website. It's really simple to address. It's wdfw.wad.gov/NOF, North of Falcon. All of the meetings are posted there. As we develop meeting materials and have meeting recordings, they get posted on individual branches off the tree for each of the meetings that happened. As we have season proposals and updated forecasts, that will be posted there, and they're public input opportunities. There's an online comment portal where you can leave your public comment, as well as information on how to get to these meetings and provide comments there. Ton of information there. There's a ton of more information from past presentations on more details of the North of Falcon process and the history and how it works. So poke around the website, you'll find a lot of good stuff, or grab a staff member and ask them how to find some of this stuff if you're interested. And with that, I believe I'm going to hand it off to Tom to talk about electronic catch record cards and mobile licensing.
Well, good morning. Tom McBride. I work special projects for the fish program. I'm going to give you a quick update on mobile licensing, and particularly the component that's electronic catch reporting. Mike, go ahead, next slide. So mobile licensing is what we call it, the whole deal. We released that in December of 2025, so just this last December. It's available for you to purchase for your 2026 spillover to 27 license year. Just so you all know, of our current license sales, about a third of the people so far have selected this option. It is an option. It's not mandatory. It's a bigger change for folks that are on my WDFW, so hunters and the anglers are on that because it's newer. For those of you on Fish Washington, it's more of an enhancement of what currently exists there. You can do it on either. You'll use electronic catch reporting to record your required reporting on salmon, steelhead, sturgeon, and halibut starting on April 1. It's not available for what's going on now. In Puget Sound, Dungeness crab, it'll be the summer 2026. That's probably July when that summer season opens up. Like I said, you don't have to use this. You'll still have the option to go paper. If you have no cell service when you're out there, it's not a problem. When you enter it on the app, there's a button there at the end after you put in what you did, you do submit catch. If you're in cell service, it automatically reports. If you're not in cell service, it'll automatically report when you go into cell service later. Next slide, please, Mike. So really, where are we at here? So I wanted to, there we go. So here's really what a lot of you have asked for this for a lot of years, and we've been working on it for several years now. It merges the recording and the reporting of your catch. That's that submit button. You're not going to have to follow up later. I talked to you already about the cell service issue, and it's on both. What we think is going to be better for all of our anglers is that one step instead of two. We get the information more quickly in season. It also probably is going to deal, you're not going to have fees to replace lost paper, lost CRCs. You don't need to purchase additional CRCs. Sorry, that was pretty quiet, wasn't it? Okay. Well, that's probably good. There's no questions on the stuff I already said. So, and then that automatic reporting, there's no penalty in salmon, but for those of you who crab, you're probably not subject to that $10 administrative fee because you're not going to fall into that trap of forgetting to do it. So next slide, please. I want to emphasize this piece. Paper's still available, but there's one thing you need to be aware of. The equipment we have out at all our dealers is pretty old and obsolete. The maintenance has gotten tough. As most states are moving to electronic, the durable stock paper suppliers, ours has gone out of business, no longer available. So at some point in 2026, you're going to see a transition away from durable stock. And what that means is if you go in after that point and purchase at a dealer, either they're going to print your license, your catch record card for you, or you're going to do it at home, but that's going to be on 8.5 by 11 paper. It'll no longer be durable stock. We're trying to maintain durable stock in that option as long as we can. I'm just letting you know that there's a change there in the future for you to deal with. Next slide, please. So what stays the same? You continue to have to report. That's how we do our harvest estimation. The reporting is not changed in any way. Same data elements we asked for. What the water body, what you caught, but there's nothing new added. You could stay paper, like I said, for like the 4th time here. And then our creel surveys and all our other established data collection is going to be maintained. So we're not taking anything away while we're adding this option on here. When you think about creel, it's not going to be substantially different. You're probably looking at in a creel interview, the addition of one question. Are you reporting electronically or are you reporting by paper? If you say electronically, the creeler may ask you to say, can I scan the barcode of your wild ID? That's how we match up that data internally. All that captures is your wild ID. There's no personal data included in that. So, and that's optional on your end to do that. So next slide. Moving from the user experience to fisheries management in 2026 and over until till March 31st of 2027, we're still going to do harvest estimation the same way we've been doing it. We'll have this additional data coming in. We'll be looking at it, but you can kind of think of it like a testing, a pilot period. It's not going to be a changeover in how we do anything. This stuff was put in statute by the legislature several years back. We're going to get the information more quickly. When you think about that, it's not just about harvest estimation. Think about how The biggest delay right now on getting our coded wire tag information is the processing of paper CRC cards. This has the potential, the likelihood, I believe the reality that's going to speed that whole thing up. Maybe that helps with our conversations. Kyle has to go talk to Canada. So it's going to be a better way to do it, and it complements all of our existing stuff. So next slide. Just last night, Kelly Hall, who does everything great up there, posted on here on our website. There's more extensive data with everything you need to look at. You can go on and get a hold of that. Two things I just thought of that I want to add here is your selection of mobile licensing, your participation in electronic catch reporting does not track your location at all. In the future, I'd like to see that as a voluntary option because I'd use it to tell me where I'm at. But none of you have to worry about, we are not tracking your location if you select this option. And like I said, the Creel stuff, you know, it's a kind of a minor ad to go on there. So I'm happy to take questions at this point. I'm kind of excited about this whole thing. So, and Kyle, is there time for questions or one in the room, one online? Yeah, I saw a hand. That was the first hand up, so I guess you win. Or the dog wins. Well, I meant the dog gets that.
Oh, believe me, you'll hear from her later. Tom Nelson, the Outdoor Line. And my question is regarding the app. One of your pushes right now is to increase the use of VTRs, voluntary trip reports. Will there be any facility in either one of these two apps to make those voluntary trip reports with regard to harvest estimation real time? And would that help the department out in any way?
Yeah, so that's your question, if I caught your question correctly, is this ability to use this data real time by going with electronic catch record card. Is that okay? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Kyle.
That will not be an option out of the gate. It won't be integrated into that. That's something looking at for the future, but just getting this initial electronic catch reporting system off the ground is the first step. But I understand the interest in that, and that's something we're thinking about down the line, but it won't be an option when this goes live in April. Also, Tom, the people online are having trouble hearing you, so you got to talk closer to the mic.
All right, and one thing I'd follow up on that is we started to roll this out at the end of 2024, and the biggest failure we would have is putting out a glitchy product for all of you to try to figure out, and we realized, you know what, it wasn't good enough, so we pulled it back. I'm sure there's going to be something that's going to come up, but we think we anticipate a lot of those issues, and the future holds a lot of changes. In fact, I think there's a point where we're going to talk about, are there other data elements that we'd want you to report that would make things work better, but we're not asking you to do anything additional right now. We just want to get this thing out, make it workable for you. So I think we have an online question. Is that right? Oh, the sound online. So one more from the room.
Hi, my name is Melanie. It's my job to write them on the piece of paper because the captain of the boat is busy doing other things. So if I'm going to do it on the app, can I enter multiple? Can I enter mine and then I can enter his?
Are you asking whether you can fill
or do I have to put the app on his phone and then enter it from his?
So, and this, I apologize, everybody in the room. I'm old, my ears are a little bit bad, so I'm anticipating. I think I heard your question, which is, can you be filling out for somebody else on your app? All right. So your catch record is going to be on your app. If you want to pick up his phone and plug in the data for him, it's got to be on his app. You won't have multiple individuals catch records on a single license.
Frank Herbeck, Tom. Will this have any impact on the catch record card derived estimates in terms of accuracy? They do a pretty good job, and that's the best we got, and that's what we're using. Creel census sometimes diverts from that pretty markedly. So that was my question. Will this help us, and are we going to be any more accurate in terms of catch record card estimates?
Yeah, good question. So, there's two ways to look at this. One way is this is just another mechanism to collect the same data we're catching off the catch record cards paper. But the other argument is, what if you have a different demographic that adopts mobile licensing? Do you have to do some sort of different bias correction there? And that's something we have to work out with the co-managers, because we're required under USP Washington to have an agreed upon harvest estimation, recreational harvest estimation plan. So it's going to be more data. One of the things that worries me is our reporting rates need to go up. And if this does that, it should be more information in a more timely fashion. But we got to dot the I's and cross the T's to make sure coming in this route, not paper, coming in electronically, are there some differences about that we need to incorporate into our estimation? You won't see any of those differences take place for 2026, but in 2027, I suspect at that point, we'll be ready to say, okay, this is what's different. We got more data, but we have to correct it slightly differently because it's coming in differently on the electronic version than what we've seen in the past. Is that great? All right, Kyle, I think you're cutting me off. I'll be here in the room. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to meet with anybody in the back or on the side or on the breaks.
Thanks, Tom. Not cutting you off, but we do have a lot of stuff to get through, but this is exciting stuff as we go to this electronic licensing and reporting. Next up, we have Dr. Marisa Litz from our science division back. I don't think she was here last year, but she's given this ocean indicators presentation to us in the past. It's interesting information, has a lot to do with what our salmon seasons will wind up looking like. So we're glad to have you back, Marisa.
Thanks, Kyle. Morning, everyone, and hopefully you'll be able to talk about the ECRC info later. But for now, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about environmental conditions. So why it's important is it provides context for the forecast that we're going to be presenting. It shows where we've been, where we are, where we're going, and kind of what we really need to be thinking about going into the season. So just an overview of the talk, and this is the main core points of the talk, so you can kind of zone out after this. But I'm going to give an update on the physical ocean conditions. Salmon spend the majority of their life in the ocean. Over 90% of salmon that hit the ocean don't survive. So that's a really critical life stage. So we're going to be talking about temperature, the status of El Nino and La Nina. We're going to be talking about the warm blob. Also, it's always fun to talk about notable biological observations. And then I'll pivot to the NOAA indicator stoplight chart. So this is a really useful tool in forecasting. It tells us what we're going to be expecting in the year to come. So the main take-homes, main take-homes is that it's still uncertain how climate variability is going to affect salmon stocks in 2026. We do know that a 2026 El Nino is on the way. We last had one in 2023. And then there's factors both in the freshwater and in the marine areas that are affecting salmon. So the timing of the last 5 back-to-back-to-back La Ninas has actually been really favorable for salmon returns in Washington. So that's coming to an end in the summer. All right. So it's always nice to start off with really high level picture of where we're at. So this is a plot. It shows the departure from the average. So the 20th century average, are we below cooler than average or are we above warmer than average? And so this is the last 175 years. And you can see since about 1980, we've been on this increasing trend of both global land and ocean temperatures. Some little respite from that is that 2025 was actually not as high as 2024 or 2023. We've been breaking records each year, and so it was a little bit cooler. All right, next slide. And then this is a little bit, it shows the same thing, but this is for the ocean. So again, it's anomaly plot. So departures from the average, red is warmer, blue is cooler. And there's really 2 features that I want to draw your attention to in terms of that. First is around the equator. And you're like, why the heck should I care about the equator? Well, why it's important is that trade winds blow at the equator. They go from east to west. And they cause the surface waters to kind of move offshore, replaced by upwelled water when those trade winds are really strong. And this is a situation we're in right now, a La Nina. And when it's cool at the equator and it sets up these La Nina conditions, it really impacts global atmospheric circulation and weather patterns. So La Ninas, we've been in back to back to back to back La Ninas for the last 5-6 years. But then the other feature I want to point out is in the Northwest Pacific. And that really red area is something new. So this is the warming in the ocean that's happening off Japan is unprecedented. It's happening faster than anywhere else in the world. And it's really impacting some of the indicators that we've relied on a long time to tell us, like, how are salmon going to do when they hit the ocean? Next slide. So yeah, just a reminder, La Nina, typically, we're in one right now, they're good for salmon. It tends to be cooler, it tends to be wetter, but we're not seeing that right now. And then an El Nino, it tends to be warmer, drier, and really poor for salmon. So next slide. So again, this La Nina that we've been in, and this is coming straight from the climate folks at NOAA. We are in a La Nina, we're gonna go El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral over the spring, and then we're going to transition. So next slide. And why this is important is that these are extreme events. El Ninos and La Ninas are extreme events, and it used to be that they only happened at a periodicity of about 7 to 10 years. You'd have an El Nino event, 7-10 years ago by, you'd have another one. Usually followed up right away by a La Nina. But what we've been seeing in the last 10 years is we're just going from one extreme to the other, one extreme to the other. So 2015, we had one of the largest El Ninos ever. We had catastrophic failure of salmon and all kinds of organisms in the ocean. Then we had some weak El Ninos, weekly, but every year we're kind of switching back and forth and back and forth. And then since 2020, we've had these back-to-back 5 moderate La Ninas. We did have a 2023 really strong El Nino, but the timing of that was the winter time. And that's good for salmon because it didn't impact them when they were returning in the summer when we were prosecuting fisheries. So we were kind of spared by that strong El Nino in 2023. All right, next slide. All right, and this is just predictions of where we're going. So we're here, so we're below 0.5 degrees. That puts us in a La Nina in that equatorial region. But the projections are we're gonna pass 0, and that's gonna put us in neutral. And then we're gonna pass 0.5 positive degrees. That's in the summertime. That's gonna shift us into an El Nino. And the plot on the right is just showing that blue is kind of fading. That's the La Nina fading. The gray bars are the neutral, and then the likelihood that we're going to be moving into an El Nino is getting more and more certain. So going away from the El Ninos, a southern oscillation, there's another kind of phenomenon that affects sea surface temperature where salmon are out in the ocean, and these are the blobs. These are the marine heat waves. We've had a number of them. They were first really detected in 2013, 2014, followed by that giant El Nino in 2015. Why they're important is that it's a high pressure system sets up over the North Pacific. It's still, there's no wind, there's no overturn of the surface waters, and you have collapse of entire ecosystems from the plankton to the zooplankton. We had cod fisheries collapse. We had salmon coming back tiny, or just declines. We way over forecast what we were going to see. They can be really damning for fish, right? We want cold, productive waters in the Gulf of Alaska where salmon are hanging out. And over the last 10 years, we've had a number of these really large El Nino events, and they tend to peak around September. And they start around May, they peak in September, and then they can wane. But we had what is interesting with them is that the sort of area where it's the warmest shifts around, So the last one, and then next slide just shows where we're at now. So there's the big one in 2014 on the left, and then on the right is where we were in September 2025. And I drew a circle around the coast because this is a really important area. Note that it's not as red right along the coast. And that's on account of strong coastal upwelling. And I'll talk about that next slide, but really that's been what's helping keep the coastal ocean really productive and salmon numbers up. Right, next. So upwelling happens on account of wind. So in the wintertime, when we get our big storms, it blows from the south. We have a lot of rain. It's not nice. And then in the springtime, those winds shift and they come down the coast from the north. And as they do that, they push surface waters offshore, and actually leads to a gradient, so higher sea surface height offshore. So the nearshore waters are filled in from bottom waters, and they come up and they are cool, they're nutrient rich, they fuel the nearshore production, they fuel the salmon, the juvenile baby salmon that are growing. Upwelling is a great process. So we had really the transition to upwelling was really early or above average in 2025, and then it was sustained through the summer. So even though we had blobs offshore, near shore was cool. Next slide. But it's not always a great thing. So upwelling also has a darker side, and that's when these waters from the near shore upwell, they can bring with them oxygen depleted water. So we lead to hypoxic conditions, and it can also lead to corrosive or low pH water. And that can degrade calcium carbonate. So anything that's got a shell, it can start to actually, like the acid in the water can corrode those organisms. So in 2025, we had, NOAA was sampling, and they saw really low oxygen poor water in 4 out of the 6 surveys they were doing in the summer. All right, so enough about the ocean. Let's transition for a second to the freshwater, or to the terrestrial environment. And this is something that we really should be paying attention to. So right now, across Washington, the snowpack is less than 50% of normal. And this is odd because it is a La Nina, and we'd expect it to be a lot wetter, but we're not seeing that. And what that means, especially for fish, is that this is impacting sort of the availability of water. It's affecting the available habitat for juvenile salmon to rear in freshwater. It's going to impact drought conditions, and it's going to impact sort of the water table and potentially lead to a lot more risk when it comes to wildfires in the summer. So this is something we really need to pay attention to. We need more water. We need that water to fall as snow in the mountains, and and if it doesn't, it could mean some trouble. Right, next. And the outlook, so we also kind of can look and see what we expect the temperature and the precipitation to be over the next 3 months. And we're not really seeing that we're going to get a ton of precipitation. So things are average for temps, but trending warm, and average for precipitation, but trending dry. So there's not really an indication in the next 3 months that we're going to break this cycle we're in right now. All right. And so some unusual observations. So typically, if the ocean's warming, if things are changing, we tend to get a lot more subtropicals and tropical species. And this is fun, right? Like, I want to hear from all of you if you're intercepting unusual critters, because it's nice to include those in this presentation. But over the last 3 years, we've seen some neat things. So bluefin tuna washing up at Orcas Island. Who would have thunk? We are seeing salmon spawning in the Arctic. So in the Arctic, they're an invasive species, right? So we have this northward shift of salmon kind of globally. Some cool king of the salmon being found again. I think this was in the Straits, as well as a record-setting mahi-mahi caught. 2024, this was a big year, so hopefully you all had a great season. We had record sockeye counts at Bonneville. Other cryptics, denizens of the deep were washing up, and we also had some coho CPUE that set records in areas of Puget Sound. 2025, some people were lucky enough to catch a 9-foot marlin off Garibaldi. And then I don't know if anyone was paying attention, but there was a juvenile humpback that stranded again off Oregon, and it was kind of a sad story. But this is something we've also had lately is a lot of razor clam openers. And we haven't had that over the last 5 or 6 years on account of domoic acid and closures for harmful algal blooms. So the fact that, upwelling's keeping things cool, we're not getting these big harmful algal bloom, closing down crab and clam fisheries is a really good thing. All right, next. All right, so kind of last bit I'm going to talk about is the NOAA, our partners over at NOAA, the salmon indicator stoplight chart. So color-coded, organized each year for the last 28 years, starting from 1998 to 2025. And these align with juvenile salmon that are heading out to sea. So are they heading out, and are they going to meet good, favorable conditions, or are they going to meet really poor conditions? And so 2025 was ranked 11 out of 28 years, so above average, right? And this is a good thing. So we see the worst year ever was the first year, 1998. We had a lot of red in the mid 2000s and then the mid 2015 era. These are not good years for salmon fishing. But what we've been in the last 5 years is in a series of we're seeing more yellows, more greens. We've been kind of incrementally increasing the favorable ocean conditions over the last 5 years. And in 2025, we're seeing, some of the best, but I don't know if folks, I'm going to talk about this next, but if folks have heard of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation Index. So this has been an index that's been used by sort of salmon forecasters for decades as being a really strong predictor of sea surface temperature in the Northeast Pacific. And when it's negative, fishing is great, salmon returns are great off Oregon, Washington. When it's positive, it's warmer, they tend to be lower, but we also, it tends to be better in the Alaska region. So PDO is doing something a little strange I'll talk about. But we're also seeing good indications of the zooplankton community at the base of the food web, as well as sort of the upwelling indices that, are keeping the near shore cool. Next. All right, so that PDO I just mentioned, it doesn't seem to be tracking sea surface temperatures in the Northeast Pacific anymore. So to the fact that in 2026, 2025, it's the most negative and lowest it's ever been. So what that would suggest is that we're going to have the most amazing, epic salmon returns we've ever seen in history. But what the climatologists are telling us is the index that we've been relying on for the last 30, 40 years, it's not telling us the same thing that we used to know. It's capturing variability across the entire North Pacific. And because it's warming so quickly in the east or in the Western Pacific off Japan, that it's capturing that, and it's more negative. The difference between the East and the West is what the index is telling us, not what's happening locally. So we need to be really careful about looking at that PDO index and saying, this means that we're going to have great salmon returns. We got to temper that a little. All right, next slide. And also it's not tracking with the El Nino Southern Oscillation that, it always used to. Some of the base of the food web stuff, those lipid-rich, the zooplankton species, the copepods that are like the cheeseburgers of the sea, they've been up the last 5 years too. And the ones that come from the south, that usually, they'll come up when there's an El Nino, they'll move in the Kelvin wave up the coast, and they're skinny and neritic and don't have a lot of nutrition. They're down. So this is, again, another great indicator. Next. The prey of the prey. So again, here's how upwelling has impacted sort of the coastal ecosystem. So because upwelling is pushing water offshore, we're seeing in 2025 really a low index of the prey of salmon. But what we think that is that many of the species might have gotten pushed offshore, and so they weren't necessary. So this one you have to take with a grain of salt. It might not necessarily mean things are bad, just that their distribution is different than in the past. All right, and I think this is the last one. And then one of the kind of best indicators that we saw from our NOAA partners was the catches of juvenile coho in 2025. and they were the best out of the 20 years or 28 years of surveys. So that's that black bar on the right there. So there were a lot of coho out there that are going to be coming back in 2026. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see too. And then last of all, so just the conclusions of this talk. Again, the ocean indicators, they trended average in 2025. We're likely to see decent returns of salmon, and likely due to the La Nina that we've had back to back to back to back over the last 5 years. But we have to be mindful because we had the December flooding followed by the low snowpack, and they're concerning for the 2025 sort of spawners and the juveniles rearing in freshwater, as well as that timing of the El Nino that's coming in the summer. Coupled with the development of a marine heat wave, could increase sea surface temperatures. So just things to be watching. But so, by and large, we're on this sort of same trend we've been in the last 5 years of increasing abundance. And that's all I have. Thank you.
We'll start online. Our hand online is from Kyle. Kyle, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. Always super helpful each year. I'm kind of curious, given the nature of the 2014, 2016 blob and all that, like what have forecasters and the climate side learned from those events that could be useful and kind of looking forward to the next several years of potentially having more El Niños on that side of the cycle?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So those blobs, I mean, they're an annual phenomenon. Like it's not like a if, it's pretty much like when they show up. So when they're most damaging is when we have no upwelling, and when that surface water blob water comes onshore, comes into the straits, and you don't have a lot of productivity. So, so we need to be watching. We're hoping that the winds are going to howl from the north and that we're going to get a lot of upwelling, because that's what's going to keep those marine heat waves offshore. And salmon are nearshore creatures. Like they're going up the Alaska current, like they're heading up in the nearshore, then they feed in the Gulf of Alaska. But, as long as they can have an area where they can feed and grow and it's productive, kind of in that nearshore, that continental shelf, that first 20 miles offshore, they're good.
Since we don't have any in the room, we'll go to the other hand online. Roland, go ahead.
Let me see if am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sweet. One of my first questions, most important, maybe I'm only allowed to ask one, is I look at your model, and I'm not a climate denier at all, but I do believe that there's man-made, but I also think there's natural cycles. And so when you go back to 1800, I know there were some big heating spells like in the 1400s. I've read some history books about Greenland. Are you looking what happened before man-made potentially climate impact and how that impacted salmon? I mean, one of the things you brought up was salmon spawning in the Arctic. And to me, that's a good thing because it says that the salmon are naturally through selection going, hey, we need to find new rivers. And my understanding is they'll do that. Salmon from one river system will go to another, and that's good for the species. It's good for genealogy. So I guess going back to my question, why do you only go to 1800? And it's not a knock on you. I'm just wondering if we could learn if we went further back, either through tree rings or ice or something else, because the salmon have survived previously through big flooding, et cetera. And there's some natural selection things that's just beautiful that is ingrained in their genetics above and beyond, La Nina and other cycles. They seem to be able to adapt. So that's my first question.
That's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. Salmon are incredibly flexible in terms of their adaptability to withstand an array of temperatures, even salinities, the fact that they can transition from freshwater to saltwater and back, like they've got this enormous amount of adaptive capacity. Going back, before the industrial era, it's really difficult to reconstruct populations of salmon. We don't have really great records. There are scientists who are looking at tree rings, old otoliths, but it's a very, there's not a lot of info there. So
How about Native Americans? I mean, I know you work with them, but they would have a rich history potentially going back with the tribes, and they may have seen some of these perturbations and may have some input for you. I'm wondering if that's real or not, if that's been lost.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of oral tradition. But it's interesting you mentioned Native Americans, because with salmon moving for the first time into the Arctic, the native communities there view them as an invasive species. They're crowding out their native species that they use for food and sustenance, and they don't want them there. So there's that history too. It's like, hey, yeah, they're flexible, they're moving north, but they can't keep moving. Like, you hit the Arctic, there's nowhere else to go. So, and this is part of more of a global trend where we're slowly seeing a lot of species move north to find their thermal niche. And salmon is just one example of that. But like we shouldn't expect 9-foot marlins and salmon to be kind of coexisting off Washington. That's not how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been perturbations. I've been fishing since.
I am so sorry. Just a second. I hit the wrong button. Roland. Sorry, Roland, go ahead.
Yeah, and don't mean to disagree with you at all, but I know I've been fishing with my dad since the 70s off Westport, and I think it's a lot more prominent now. But even back then, there was occasionally a weird fish caught, and I'm not disagreeing. I think you're right, but I think that some of these things may have occurred previously, but like you said, it's hard to tell. But my second question, and I don't want to take up too much of your valuable time and everyone else's, is with the stocks that you see increasing for the cohos, are you looking at how many of those are based on hatchery production versus wild production? Is it pretty much equivalent and it has more to do with survival rates of the small fish, or is one greater than the other? And the reason I'm asking is hatchery production has supposedly gone up.
So it is across both hatchery and natural production. And it's, and I think as the director mentioned at the beginning of this talk, is that we're also seeing, winners and losers. So we're having some systems that are having, the best ever. Others, an adjacent watershed is, seeing some of the poorest returns that we've ever seen. So again, it comes down to sort of really regional levels of variability. Anyhow, I think we want to move on to hear about the forecast. So thank you for your question. Feel free to reach out to me, via email and or give me a call, and we could chat through some of this stuff. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marisa. Marisa, that's always a lot of people's favorite presentation of the meeting. So thanks for being here and giving it and answering some questions. With that, we are going to dive into the actual forecast. We're going to start with Puget Sound and coastal Chinook and coho. I'm going to pass it off to Christina Iverson, who's going to tag this with Haley Rosenthal.
Thanks, Kyle. Sound check. Okay. Yeah, so that was a great segue into what we are going to be talking about next. I'm Christina Iverson, the Puget Sound Salmon Manager. I'm going to walk through the coastal and Puget Sound Chinook slides. Go ahead, Mike. Excellent photo. Okay, so for this year, you'll see here, this is a page from the Salmon Abundance indicators for 2024. This is the governor's State of the Salmon report, and it comes out every 2 years. So for this, I just wanted to kind of bring your attention to the fact that you'll notice Puget Sound populations, aside from the Hood Canal summer chum, are still listed as in crisis. And there has been some populations that have seen some improvements. Those are largely on the Columbia. So you'll see those in blue. This is just to kind of set the stage of, since listing, populations for Puget Sound specifically haven't been doing great as far as like making any sort of improvements on their abundance and forecasts. Next slide. So this is a preliminary look at 2025 Chinook returns throughout Puget Sound and the coast. And you can see mostly out for the coast, you'll see they were in a neutral or a positive, where we did have throughout Puget Sound 3 that were in poor status relative to the 10-year average for these populations. So again, these are all preliminary, and we're in the next slide, we'll take a look at how this 2026 compares to 2025. Go ahead, Mike. So you'll see for 2026, we did see some improvement. We, especially in the central and south Puget Sound, we went from 3 that were in poor status to 1. And then this also breaks out the hatchery, some of the questions from the last caller, hatchery versus natural for our forecast. So for 2026, the total Puget Sound forecast for Chinook is just over 300,000. And that's broken down between hatchery at 278,000 roughly, and natural origin is roughly 30,000. Then for the coast, it's more neutral. We have a total of 67,000 roughly, and 33,000 of that is hatchery, and roughly similar 33,000 for natural origin. This is all, again, relative to the 10-year average run size. Next slide. So this is just kind of a look at how have these populations been trending over time for natural and hatchery. So for 2026, based on the forecasts we have now, the hatchery populations are up 60%, and natural origin is down 35%, and this is compared to the 10-year average. Hatchery for 2026 compared to 2025 is up 16%, and natural origin is up 7%. And then also just compared to the 10-year average, Chinook overall for Puget Sounders up 40%, and 15% from 2025. And you can see in the figure, the hatchery is the more solid, natural origin is the lighter. Go ahead, Mike. So for coastal Chinook, the forecast isn't as rosy, I guess, given these numbers here for 2026 and compared to 2025. The hatchery forecast for Chinook is down 11%, and the natural origin is down 7% compared to the 10-year. Hatchery is down 20%, and natural down 2% compared to last year in 2025. And the total is down 9% from the 10-year average and 12% from last year. Next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Haley Rosenthal. She's our Puget Sound support biologist for coho. Thanks, Haley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Rosenthal, and I'll be walking through the coho forecast for Puget Sound and coastal stocks. Next slide, please. So here we see the coho historical run size for Puget Sound through 2024. The darker shade of blue is our hatchery stocks, and the lighter shade of blue here is natural origin stocks for coho. Next slide. This slide looks at preliminary returns for coho for 2025. Most returns were neutral to poor. And once again, they are preliminary. Next slide, please. Now here is the stoplight chart for our coho forecast for 2026. Forecasts range from good to poor. We predict good returns in North Puget Sound and poor returns in South Puget Sound, and then a range between good and neutral on the coast. Next slide. This slide focuses on Puget Sound forecast and abundance trends. Our forecasts indicate that hatchery populations are up 45% over a recent 10-year average and 4% compared to last year's forecasts. Natural origin populations are up 55% over a recent 10-year average and 53% compared to our 2025 forecast. And in total, combining hatchery and natural origin forecasts, Puget Sound coho is up 49% from the 10-year average and up 22% from last year's forecast. Next slide, please. So this slide is now focusing on our coastal coho forecasts and abundances. The 2026 forecast for hatchery coastal coho are up 76% compared to a recent 10-year average and 9% compared to last year's forecast. And our natural origin forecasts are up 25% compared to recent 10-year average and 11% compared to 2025 forecasts. And in total, hatchery and natural origin combined, coastal coho forecasts are up 54% from the 10-year average run size and 10% from last year's forecast. So now I will hand it off to Matt Bogard, our Chum Pink sockeye specialist, to review our Chum salmon forecast.
Morning, everyone. I'm Matt Bogard, the Chum Pink sockeye specialist for WDFW. I'm going to give the overview for Chum and sockeye, skip over pinks this year since it's an even year. Go ahead, Mike. I'll start off with Chum just to give a brief overview of the historical returns throughout Puget Sound. So you can see on the x-axis our returns going back to 1968 here. Puget Sound wide Chum returns and the green bars on the top, Grays Harbor and Willapa Bay, and gray and purple respectively on the coast. As you can see, Chum populations have been variable throughout this historical record, that we see some highs and lows in there. Going back to the 90s and early 2000s, we saw some really positive returns, followed by some fairly poor returns in some of those systems. You can see the recent 10-year average, we see that variability kind of increasing, where we saw some historic lows in some systems as recent as 2020 and 2019, 2023. We saw some really positive returns in 2024 and 2025. You can see that recent 10-year average with the red dashed line throughout Puget Sound, just over 1.2 million there. Going into our forecast for this year, we want to kind of focus in on 2022 and 2023, as those are the 4 and 3-year-olds that we're going to be thinking about in 2026. Go ahead, Mike. So as the previous presenters showed, sort of the range from poor to neutral and good based on the recent averages, good being over 125%, neutral at 75 to 125, and poor being below 75%. So you can see that's pretty wide ranging throughout Puget Sound. Kind of give some context here as we start north in the Nooksack, that the returns have been relatively neutral there, following the 10-year average. Going down to the Skagit, for the Skagit, Stillaguamish, and Snohomish, I'm actually comparing it to the odd years here because we do see such a drastic difference between our even odd year Chum returns for those systems. For Skagit River, it was a good return for 2025, however, still likely short of that escapement goal. We have this sort of issue with a few of our stocks here, thinking about the 10-year average, sort of a shifting baseline syndrome, where we're seeing, relative to the 10-year average, it was good, but in the historical context and our escapement goals, that's actually not a good return for the Skagit. Similarly for the Snohomish, good return relative to the odd year cycle. Snohomish is neutral. We saw pretty solid returns in Central and South Puget Sound, neutral in the Hood Canal, poor on the Strait, and then great returns on the coast. We saw record high return in Willapa Bay. slide, please. Looking ahead at this coming season, we see that sort of variability shifting around Puget Sound again. Sort of neutral returns expected up north in the Nooksack and Skagit. Again, for the Skagit, Stillaguamish, and Snohomish, kind of looking at those even year patterns, expecting a relatively positive return for the Snohomish and Stillaguamish, which is great to see. Central and South Puget Sound, that's just above average there. The blue neutral zone. Going over to Hood Canal, we're seeing a below average and a poor expectation for Hood Canal, fall chum. Up in the Strait, that's expected to be a strong return there. And similarly for Willapa Bay and Grays Harbor, we're expecting strong chum returns there. Sorry, I kind of missed the totals I was going through, but you can see those printed out for the individual stocks in the handout as well. The North Sound indicating the stocks from Nooksack all the way to the Snohomish, Central and South Sound, Green River South, and then Hood Canal, and the coastal streams are kind of all inclusive there. Next slide, please. So getting to the Puget Sound wide fall chum forecast, similar to the previous slides, I have the hatchery and natural origin recruit here split out, where HOR is hatchery and NOR is natural origin recruits. The darker blue shading bars are the hatchery estimates, and the lighter ones are the natural, either observed or forecast, with the forecast being in the sort of orange color there. We can see that the hatchery origin expectation is down about 20% from that recent 10-year average, whereas the natural origin expectation is up 17%. Going out to the coast, we can see that trend sort of continuing upward. Positive expectations there with Grays Harbor up again. Following that record return last year, we're still seeing a positive forecast there, up 31% over the 10-year average. Willapa Bay, sorry, I had that backwards. Record returns in Willapa Bay, and still up 35% over the recent 10-year average. Next, please. This is a new addition to the slideshow this year. So we're starting to look at some modeling options for Columbia River chum. Christina presented the salmon outlook that Columbia River chum have generally been on a bit of a positive note here. I'm doing some exploratory modeling using integrated population models that forecast the Washington-specific stocks here. Incorporates basically all available data, looking at spawner smolt abundances, sex and age compositions, hatchery, natural origin, fecundity, all of those things. That piece of data that we have info on chum. We do see highly variable age compositions, which is kind of the story throughout Puget Sound chum as well. That's kind of led to forecast uncertainty, but looking at a relatively positive forecast, just under 25,000 for Columbia River chum on the Washington side. Please. Next, I'll get into our sockeye salmon stocks. This would be a good place to point out in the handout that I had Mike print the wrong version, so it's my mistake that the Columbia River section for sockeye, you'll notice that I accidentally put the total in the wild, so that it should just be in the total, since that includes some of the systems that do have hatchery production there, like the Snake River sockeye. Go ahead. Looking back at 2025, we had sort of a mixed bag of returns there, where we saw record high returns coming back to the Baker Lake system. That was not the case for Lake Washington sockeye, where our actual returns batch of Ballard locks were about half of the forecast for a poor return. Columbia River, similar story, where we were well short of the forecast there, with poor returns kind of throughout, except for the Snake River population. Looking ahead at 2026, I'll break these down into their individual stocks on slides upcoming, but looking ahead at Baker Lake, we have another strong forecast there. If this materializes, that would be the second largest return following last year's record return. Lake Washington, this is another example of sort of the shifting baseline, where the recent 10-year average is kind of the expectation this year. However, comparing that to our historical escapement goals and historical returns for Lake Washington, that I'll show in a later slide, that's actually not a great figure there. Columbia River, sort of neutral average returns expected there, with a Columbia River total at 270, just under 275,000. And then the Snake River stock within that group, if I believe that would be a record return if that materializes as well. Next slide, please. Just to kind of break down again the sort of historical context for Puget Sound sockeye, so looking specifically at Baker Lake and Lake Washington, with Baker Lake on top with the darker bars stacked on top of Lake Washington in the green. We can see historically Lake Washington comprised the much larger component of Puget Sound sockeye. That's kind of flipped in recent years, where we're seeing, again, those strong returns back to Baker Lake. Looking specifically at the forecast this year with the orange bar with Baker Lake on top, we see, again, that's up 67% over that recent 10-year average, so really positive outlook for this year. Lake Washington, that's, again, not the case, where we saw not so long ago in the early 2000s that we did see strong returns, but looking at the recent decade, it's still down 20% for expectation this year. Once again, looking at Columbia River sockeye forecasts, breaking that down, the Okanagan Basin down 19% from the recent 10 years, Lake Wenatchee up 10%, Yakima Deschutes down 8%, and Snake River up 215%. Just a brief overview of Fraser sockeye forecasts, as we'll be looking ahead at what's expected to be an Adams year dominant cycle. We'll kind of get into that. You can see from the plot here that Fraser sockeye typically follow a pretty strong 4-year age class on that dominant cycle. So 2026 would be expected to fall in line with that. However, in recent, what's called Adams years, based off of the strong Lake Shuswap population or stock there, basically the productivity and returns for that specific stock has been decreasing. As you can see the breakdown from the late component of the return, we'd expect that to be much higher and kind of matching the summer return on those dominant years. However, this year we see the summer return making up the dominant component. Similar to last year, the total Fraser sockeye forecast is 7.7 million. 4.3 of that is the summers and 2.2 is the lates. Looking at some of those specifics, like I said, the decreasing productivity of the late run component and the parent brood for 2026, going back 4 years ago, was the lowest on record for this cycle. So although it seems kind of positive and matching what we saw last year, it's maybe not the best news for that dominant cycle. I believe that's all for Chum and sockeye.
Thanks, Matt and Christina and Haley. We do have a few minutes for questions. I'll ask you to keep two things in mind. Keep the questions about the forecast. We'll have discussions about fisheries and fishery implications of the forecast in the breakout sessions. And the people who presented this were presenting information that was put together by a whole bunch of people. So they might not be the right person to answer your question. So I'll ask the regional staff that are involved in the detailed forecast. If you hear a question you can help out on, raise your hand, whether you're online or in the room. And with that, maybe we'll start online and then go in the room.
Okay, we'll start with our first hand online. Go ahead, Chuck. Chuck, you can unmute.
Yeah, I'm trying to get up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got you.
Yeah, I had a question. Like the last couple of years of prediction was low for the chum seasons, and then the prediction, and then the forecast was, or the actual output was significantly higher than what you predicted. And I was just wondering how you're missing on the forecast when they're so. That's what I'm kind of looking at. Usually when I see you guys have lower forecasts, it means we're going to have a good run.
Yeah, that's I might have Mike flip back to the historical chum abundance slides. I'm not sure the number on that. Yeah, one of the things I tried to point out is the historic variability with chum returns. We go back to 2019 and 2020, where we saw some of the lowest abundances we've seen in at least 30, 40 years in some of those populations, where kind of following some of that historic climate variability that Dr. Litz presented. So some of those aspects are challenging to work into the forecast. Speaking kind of specifically of the recent couple of years, 2024, we saw historic returns in South Puget Sound, and kind of leaning again in 2025, we saw sort of a range of forecasts. Some of them did underpredict, and some of them did overpredict as well. So yeah, evaluating some of those biases, or if we're making consistent over or under predictions, are important in the process.
But don't you think some of it is like our fishing time has really decreased over the years? We've used to fish a lot more openings, and then I think we're getting down to like 4 to 5 days being on the water, and I think that has a kind of maybe increased the run size, in my opinion, just based on what I've been doing for 40 years.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can definitely address in the commercial breakout section, but definitely with Chum, it's really important to rely on some of those in-season tools that we have, thinking about some of our test fisheries and looking at the commercial catch data itself. So thanks for the question. Sorry, Shane, I'm guessing.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Philip. I wrote down a question about pinnipeds. I really didn't hear anything talked about on pinnipeds. So pinnipeds seem to be a big problem for salmon recovery, and I understand that they're federally protected. And I also know that there have been limited target removal permits in some areas of Washington. I spoke with the founder of Wild Eco Health, which is a contract hired by the department. Based on our conversations, her views on pinniped predation and the direction of her research do not seem to match the common understanding of pinnipeds as a significant predator of salmon. Could someone here explain more about the current pinniped research the department is doing? And what is the department doing to find a balance between a fully recovered pinniped population and salmon recovery that in some areas is stagnant or declining, while allowing both to coexist in Washington waters?
So thanks for the question. We've had presentations at this meeting and at some of our other North of Falcon meetings that were updates on where we are on those issues. We don't have the right staff in the room here today to talk through all that. It's on everyone's mind. Encourage you to go back. I can find the dates and the presentations that we did have given in the past for you to look at if you haven't. And it's on everyone's mind. I don't know if we'll be able to put together a presentation for one of our subsequent meetings this year, but we just don't have the right people here. We're here to talk about the fishery side of things.
Our next hand online is Roya. You can unmute.
Hi, yes. My name is Roya. I'm a high school student, and so this is a portion of my final for an environmental science class. So thanks for the opportunity to attend the meeting. I thought it was really interesting to see how warming ocean conditions are influencing upwelling and juvenile salmon distribution. I saw that along the coast, Puget Sound Chinook populations are mostly in crisis, despite hatchery increases, like natural origin populations are declining. I was wondering that given the unprecedented ocean warming near Japan and our ENSO cycles, how are you as researchers incorporating unusual oceanographic trends into things like exploratory analysis with your integrated population model? Because I saw that mostly relies on age and sex and demographic information as opposed to the complexity of ecosystem responses to warming waters.
So there was a lot there, and honestly, you were talking very fast. The stuff Marisa spoke to, all of those ocean conditions for everything we do, but specifically for forecasting, we're trying to figure out how to integrate that stuff to do a better job of predicting how many fish we will see return. We see things changing, even relationships among ocean conditions that used to be really strong are kind of not as strong anymore, and that has an effect on what happens to salmon. So we're looking at all of that stuff. It's really complicated. The previous question about will we under predicting chum run sizes and the cost, we're trying to figure all that out, but it is not easy to predict salmon abundances. And as we get more and more information, we're trying to do a better job at doing that. I know we had one more in the room. We should probably take that and then move on to the Columbia River.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that Fraser sockeye run. Back in the early 70s, we had less fish on the grounds producing more harvest. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Adams River run comes in much bigger than forecast. What I'm concerned about is the summer run, all the spawners you put on that were put on the ground during the summer run. So the question is the cycle shifting? And certainly wouldn't like seeing that with the Adams River. Okay.
And you have a person sitting right behind you, and I have a person standing right next to me who are involved in the Fraser process and the forecasting. So I'll see if either of them has an initial reaction, or you guys can follow up in the commercial breakout on that too.
I guess I'll start with the technical side, and then Mickey can jump in if there's anything that I've missed. Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I tried to highlight with the decreasing productivity of that late run, it is fairly alarming to see that continue to decline in the way that it has. But yeah, hopefully we'll see better news on that in season. The summer run specifically, as we go through the forecasting process, DFO is kind of, they're the ones responsible for putting together the forecast, and as the technical committee members are participatory, we ask questions on sort of the stock recruit curves that are put forth and sort of the historical trends. And it's definitely something that has come up, and you know, seeing sort of the density dependence on the spawning grounds. We haven't seen that for the summer run stocks yet, but definitely continue to look for that in the future.
All right, thanks again, Matt and Christina and Haley, and thanks for the questions. I will now pass it off to Shannon Conley, who's going to talk about Columbia River forecast.
Thank you, Kyle. Hi, I'm Shannon Conley. I'm the Columbia River Policy Analyst. And today I'm presenting on the 2025 returns and 2026 forecast for our river. So we're going to start with Chinook today. So this graph shows the total returning Chinook to the Columbia River. As you can see, we've been in a pretty standard flow the last couple years here. An important component, we're presenting spring today, but that is not part of the North of Falcon process, but we want to show you anyway. So moving forward. Thank you. Okay. Beginning with the spring Chinook returns, we split spring into lower spring and upriver spring. For lower spring, that's the Cowlitz, Kalama, Lewis, Sandy, Willamette, and our select areas. And then for upriver, it's upstream of Bonneville Dam. For lower spring, we came in at 90,667, which is 114% of that 10-year average return. For upriver, we saw a return of 154,703, which is 111% of that 10-year average. Moving on to summer Chinook, we saw a return of 43,642, which is 66% of that 10-year average return, which is obviously a little bit less exciting than spring. Moving forward for our forecast of 2026, pretty close to our 2025 returns. Lower and upriver are coming in close to that 10-year average, with lower river at 81,400 and upper river springers at 147,300. And then Snake River wild forecast is an 8% of the total run. And our summers are coming in at 41,000 even. So moving on to fall Chinook. This is the big one. So for fall Chinook, we split it up. We have our Thule stocks and we have our Bright stocks. For Thule stocks, that includes the Lower River Hatchery and the Bonneville Pool Hatchery. For Bright stocks, that's the Select Area Brights, the Lower River Wilds, the Lower River Brights, the Pool Upriver Brights, the Upper River Brights. So we split those out. So I'm going to start with Thule's. So Thule stocks came in above our 10-year average, with LRH returning at 115,428 and BPH returning at 126,093. For Bright stocks, it's a bit more varied. SABs came in at 2,828, which is 70% of that 10-year average. Lower River Wild came in at 19,801. Lower River Brights came in at 5,880. Pool Up River Brights came in at 125,053, which is 171% of the 10-year average. The Upper River Brights came in at 290, 428. And then the total fall Chinook return was 685,511, which again is super close to that 10-year average return. For the 2026 forecast, the Tule stocks remain optimistic, with LRH coming in at 118,600 and BPH coming in at 123,400. Bright stocks, again, are a little bit more of a mixed bag, with SABs coming in at 400, Lower River Wild coming in at 15,800, Lurbs coming in at 5,000, Pubs coming in at 106,500, and Herbs coming in at 281,600. Our total fall is, again, pretty close to that 10-year average at 651,300. Yeah, so moving on to the Lower River Tule matrix. The exploitation rate matrix, called the Tule matrix. 2026 is expected to be managed to that 41% ER, which is also what we saw in 2025. Where we're at. Moving on to the herb harvest rate schedule, which is defined under the USV Oregon Management Agreement. Herbs are about 200,000, but the Snake River Wild is currently unavailable, but we will let folks know as soon as we have that available. Moving on to coho. So coho are split into our earlies, which are historically traveled south of the river mouth, Columbia River mouth, and arrive back in early fall, and late coho, which are historically traveled north of Columbia River mouth and arrive back in later fall. The 2025 ocean returns were similar to the last few years, with earlies estimated at a 353,580 return, and lates estimated to be 261,083, which is 122% of the 10-year average and 172% of the 10-year average, respectively. And then the total is 614,618. The 2026 return forecast looks pretty similar to that 10-year average again, with earlies coming in at 322,700 and lates coming in at 188,500. And then the total is 511,200. The Lower Columbia Natural Coho Exploitation Rate Matrix. The Marine Survival Index this year is high. So coho are expected to be managed to a limit of 23%, which is the exploitation rate we also saw in 2025 again. Moving on to steelhead. For upriver summer steelhead, we have them split into A index and B index. For A index, our 2025 upriver returns were 128,389. And our natural origin returns are 46,542, which are 125% and 140% of that 10-year average. For B index, the returns were 22,205, and our natural origin was 1,318, both below that 10-year average. For the 2026 upriver summer steelhead forecast, A index, we're looking at really close to that 10-year average with 87,900, with the natural origin component at 33,100, which again is also close to that 10-year average. For B index, we are looking at decently above that 10-year average with 40,100 forecasted returns, and the natural origin component at 4,500. Yeah, I would, we often remind folks that we're on a seeming incline with steelhead, but we are still in a period of low abundance. And that's, I believe, all I have for you. Thank you so much for listening.
We have some time for questions. If we have any online, we'll do one online and one in the room.
Hello, everybody. Jake Rice again, statewide salmon and steelhead manager. I'm here to talk through Salmon Technical Team, or STT. It's an advisory committee to the Pacific Fishery Management Council and technical work group that provides impact assessments relevant to ESA and the fishery management plan. I'll presenting the STT produced tables I-1 and I-2 from council document preseason report 1, which is a compilation of forecast and was finalized earlier this week. The report should be out soon at the pecouncil.org. I'll quickly cover these forecast tables with a focus on stocks and issues of significance to council area fisheries. There should be a printout. If you did not get the printout, there's a larger version out up front. So some of the text may be small, but anyway, next slide. So starting with table I-1, the Chinook forecast table, the 2026 Sacramento River Fall Chinook forecast is 392,000, which is significantly improved from 2025 and above the previous 5-year average. Moving down, Klamath River Fall Chinook now meet the criteria for not overfished rebuilding after being declared overfished by the council in 2018. The 2026 forecast is 176,000, which is above the 5-year average. The improved forecast for these two stocks could result in more Chinook fishing opportunities south of Falcon after reductions in closures in recent years. Moving down, Shannon did an excellent job of covering Columbia River Chinook, so I won't add much here. With the forecast on the low end, Upper River Summer Chinook may be a management consideration for setting ocean fisheries this year. Columbia River Fall Chinook stocks make up a significant portion of north of Falcon ocean catches, although the total Columbia River Fall Chinook forecast is down from last year. It remains the second highest in the previous 5 years and should still allow significant opportunity. Continuing to move down, the total allowable exploitation rate, on the lower Columbia River natural truly Chinook is 41%. Has been a constraint for ocean fisheries in most years, and I expect the natural trulies to be a key limiting stock for north of Falcon ocean Chinook fisheries this year. I will note the Bonneville Pool Hatchery stock, BPH, is represented in this table as SCH Spring Creek Hatchery. Okay, so flipping to page 2, Washington coastal Chinook stocks don't typically play a significant role in these ocean fisheries, so I'll breeze through this quickly. Do want to point out that the Queet spring summer forecast is 714 and up from recent years, which is good to see. This stock now meets the criteria for not overfished rebuilding after being declared overfished by the council in 2023. Now I'll be moving to page 3. Puget Sound Chinook stocks are typically impacted heavily by Washington ocean fisheries, but can be a management consideration as all fishing areas contribute to achieving conservation objectives. Christina covered these forecasts very well in detail, so I won't add much here right now. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to the next page, which is table I-2, and take a look at coho. Perfect. The Ocean Production Index, OPI area, consists of all coho stocks south of Ledbetter Point. The 2026 forecast is 737,000. While that is down from last year's forecast, it's still a decent expected return. Columbia River earlies and lates are hatchery runs that make up the majority of the OPI forecast and contribute heavily to ocean recreational coho fishery catches. This year's forecast for those stocks are actually up from last year, 519,000, which bodes well for ocean coho opportunity. Moving down, lower Columbia River coho, or LCNs, are forecasted for 101,000, up from last year and the highest forecast over the years in this table. Shannon mentioned the allowable exploitation rate on LCN coho is 23%, or will be expected to be 23% in 2026. Same as last year, and they're likely to be a limiter to ocean coho opportunity. Continuing to move down, Oregon coastal naturals, or OCNs, are down from last year's large forecast and in line with the recent 5-year average with a forecast of 218,000. The allowable exploitation rate is 30% 2026, same as it was last year. For Washington coastal coho stocks, as a whole, they're forecasted slightly above last year, with natural stocks forecasted just below the recent 5-year average, and hatchery stocks above. Some of these stocks have been constraining for ocean fisheries in recent years, so these forecasts are encouraging. We'll go to the last page, please. On the final page of the table, in Puget Sound coho, most of which are not drivers of ocean fisheries, but are significant to planning of inside and terminal fisheries. One last stock I'd like to mention that isn't reported in these tables is interior Fraser, which includes Thompson River coho. Meeting interior Fraser conservation objectives could be constraining in 2026, and the forecast, which is produced by Canada, isn't expected to be available until mid-March. We expect that the southern U.S. exploitation rate for interior Fraser will be 10% this year. Final salmon technical team item I'd like to cover is part of the preseason report 1. The team analyzes whether managed natural coho stocks will meet their conservation criteria if 2025 fisheries were in place with the 2026 stock abundance forecast. This is also known as the NALF model run. NALF standing for next year's abundance is last year's fisheries. This analysis found in table V6 of the report, which again will be published online, results in all evaluated coho stocks meeting their conservation criteria. So this is a good starting point for 2026 coho opportunity and fishery planning. So again, brief rundown there. If anybody didn't get these tables, I know they're hard to see and stuff, a little better online, but we have those printed out, so don't forget to grab some of those. So not sure if we have time for 1 or 2 questions. And then if not, I will go to the next slide. I see you up there waving. And then I'll go to the next slide after this with a breakout room list. So.
My question is, with the limited recreational opportunity on the Queets River, who is responsible for overharvesting of Chinook?
Can you repeat that question one more time? Please, thank you.
Sure. With the limited recreational opportunity allowed on the Queets River, you mentioned that there was an overharvest of Chinook. Who's responsible for that overharvest? What group?
So the population, I can't stand right in front of the speaker, it deafens me. The population Jake mentioned are Queets, spring, summer Chinook. That's a population that met the criteria for overfished under the Pacific Fishery Management Council, the Magnuson-Stevens Act criteria. The weird thing about that is a population can hit that overfished level and it can have nothing to do with fishing. It's just about the abundance of that stock declining below a certain level. Fishing isn't what's affecting the Queets, spring, summer Chinook. Nobody's really fishing those. It's more about habitat and ocean conditions, and the population just dipped below that level. There's really no fishing we can reduce that helps with that, but the population is now increasing in abundance and getting back above that level. So that's a weird one because it's overfished, but that's just what gets applied to it anytime the abundance drops to a certain level. That doesn't mean it has anything to do with fishing.
And we have a question online from Cole. Cole, go ahead. Cole, you can unmute. Okay, Cole, while you figure that out, we're going to go to our next hand. James, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Great, thanks. Just wanted to say I really appreciate the WDFW staff. Great meeting as always. So thanks for putting all the time and energy into this. And I also wanted to flag wild summer coho and the quill based on the tables presented look like another year. Tough numbers. If I was reading the tables right, it's about 500 summer coho forecasted. It's a unique population, and just wanted to express the appreciation for the state, the tribes, trying to thread the needle with abundant fall coho and very few wild summer coho, and hope we can keep working on creative ways to manage those in season, given the low abundance. Thanks again.
Thank you for that. I think we had one more in the room.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. My question here is how are we doing with the West Coast Vancouver Island fishery and our stocks of concern? I'm sure that came up in the discussions in Vancouver, but do we know how many of these, like Stillaguamish, Snohomish, early arriving Nooksack fish are being intercepted? They're presently fishing on Vancouver Island and the Queen Charlotte's. It starts in January 1st to March, and then they go into a summer fishery. So are we making any progress on learning what's going on there?
Thanks for that, Shannon. As you know, we've been through multiple iterations of the Chinook chapter of the Pacific Salmon Treaty. Major effort back in 2007, 2008, going into the new chapter that went in 2009. Fast forward 10 years, same thing leading up to the 2019 agreement. Yes, all those discussions are going on again about where are U.S. stocks getting hit. We've gotten big reductions in northern fisheries. They've come at a cost, financial trade-offs for other species. All those discussions are happening again because we need to have a new Chinook and other chapters in place by 2029, and there's a whole bunch of work that has to go on ahead of that. So no one has perfect information. Yes, we're all trying to figure out where our stock's getting hit, and yes, all those conversations will be going on over the next couple years, trying to get to that new agreement.
I really have a hard time with this Thompson River thing, you know, so it's always a constraining factor with our terminal fishery in Bellingham Bay. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon, and happy to talk to you about the Thompson thing. Yes, we see numbers, and if you look at the historic run size and escapement graphs on Thompson, escapement's not bad. It's back up where it was in the 80s. The difference is that escapement in the 80s was producing way more fish that could be caught. The margin's much smaller now. So yeah, it's affecting our fisheries. It's affecting their fisheries more. But yes, it's one of those populations it's not doing great. We had one other online that you couldn't unmute. If we can't get them, then I'll pass it back to Jake to talk about the rest of the day.
The person online put their hand down. If there's another person online with a question.
Okay, thanks everybody. So moving kind of into the next part of our day. Next slide. Breakout rooms, just a reminder, you're looking for the Puget Sound recreational, stay here in this room. Ocean Columbia River, that will be in the Natural Resources building across the way in 172. Puget Sound Commercial, be in the NRB, same building across the way, 175. And the Coastal Straits will be in the NRB room 682. So I would ask, if you're not familiar with the Natural Resources building and those rooms, we'll try to identify a couple staff. Dr. Mickey Yaga over there, raise your hand, is going to the Puget Sound Commercial room. Chad Herring, over here on my left, your right, is going to the Coastal and Straits, and Ryan Shannon somewhere, or Kyle. Follow Kyle Addix, and he'll take you those rooms. We're going to keep on schedule to start those breakouts at 11:30, so we've got a little bit of time. It usually takes us 15, 20 minutes to get everybody moved over. Again, if you have any questions, come find one of us, the staff, and we'll make sure you get to the right room. Those online, you should get moved to the correct breakout room here shortly. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you here shortly. Thank you.
And for the people online, I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. If you registered after 8:45 this morning, I'm going to have to auto sort you. So just keep that in mind. If you want to put it in the chat which room you would like to go to, I can sort you from there. Thanks.
Yes, sir. And then same thing.